What's up, guys? My name is DJ Swivel, and on this week's episode of Storytime, I'm going to be sharing with you the story of how I mixed Don't Let Me Down. Some interesting, funny things happened during that mix, but also why it's so important to live in a music hub if you want to have a career in music. But before we get started, make sure you like, subscribe, comment, hit the notification bell, run the intro.
DJ Swivel, don't you tell no story, please. DJ Swivel, don't make it cheese.
What's up, guys? I am DJ Swivel, and we're back for another week of Storytime. This week's episode is a fun one, and it really speaks to, how small the music industry really is. So this is the story of mixing Don't Let Me Down for the Chainsmokers. Amazing song, huge part of my career, won a Grammy for it. It's somewhere over here. And just one of my favorite songs I've ever worked on, and an interesting story while mixing. So where does the story start? I guess it starts, this would have been, end of 2015. And I had just moved to Los Angeles, brand new in Los Angeles. And Don't Let Me Down was actually the second song I ever mixed for the Chainsmokers. And it was part of the Collage EP. I had mixed a song from the Roses EP prior. And Don't Let Me Down was the first song I mixed for the Collage EP. And so I remember being sent the MP3 from Drew and hearing the song, and I was like, instantly, this is a smash. When you're mixing records, you don't always feel that, right? Even when songs become big, you don't always feel like instant smash. A good example of this is when I first heard Closer. When I first heard Closer, I thought, this is a pretty good pop song. I like it. It's pretty solid. But I didn't think it was quite as much of a smash, at least in my brain, as Don't Let Me Down was. I felt like Don't Let Me Down felt like a bigger record, a more urgent record. It was more aggressive. And I thought Closer was like a little soft. But that just goes to show you it's very difficult to discern what the audience will react to. Again, I thought it was a great song, but I felt like Don't Let Me Down was actually like a stronger single. It felt more unique. And so anyways, the first time I heard Don't Let Me Down, instantly, that's a hit record. That is going to be a hit record. I knew it. And so I get the files, I get started on the mix, and at this time, I'm living in North Hollywood in my first apartment, and I'm mixing in my living room next to a noisy refrigerator and the whole deal. I did not have an amazing mixing environment. I was brand new in LA. I hadn't got a studio set up yet properly, but we needed to work. And so I got started mixing. Luckily, I have these amazing Genelec monitors, and I love Genelec. They're not sponsoring this video, but I have these amazing Genelec monitors that will tune to the room, and so I can kind of compensate for a bad room, in this case, my living room. And so it made it tolerable and palatable. And so anyways, I get the files, I start going through it, and I start mixing the song. And so I'm mixing, and keep in mind, I'm in an apartment building, and I used to get noise complaints all the time in this apartment building. In LA, I think it's warm weather, the walls are built thin. Every neighbor can hear everything you're doing in the sort of LA apartment complexes. And so I used to get noise complaints all the time. I'm trying to mix sort of quietly, but also, Don't Let Me Down has a ton of energy in it and big heavy bass in the drop and things like that. And so I want to feel that when I'm mixing so I understand how people will react in a club, for example. So I'm doing my best to mix at a normal level. And I get the mix about 50% of the way there, close enough to have Drew and Alex come in and listen to the mix. Now, typically, Drew would go through more of the mixing stuff with me, and so I got it close enough. The way that we work, we kind of it's not a straight up get the files, mix, and deliver type of situation. There's a lot more back and forth when I was doing those records with those guys. I would offer some constructive criticism over how to, adjust the production. Like, hey, I think we can find a better kick drum, or I think this bass doesn't really work, or whatever. And then it's kind of like production and mixing at the same time, sort of. So a bit of a unique approach to how I normally mix records. So I get the mix close enough where I felt like, all right, it's good enough for Drew to listen, and then we'll pick it apart and we'll see how we can improve the record. So Drew comes over to my apartment in North Hollywood, and we start listening to the mix where I've got it and going through. And so we start, picking apart the drums and the bass. And one of the issues I had was I didn't love the kick drum sound initially. I didn't think it had quite enough impact, and it wasn't quite unique enough. It was a bit of a simpler kick. And so we ended up swapping out a kick drum, which we liked better, and it worked better with the bass and all this stuff. So we swap out a kick drum, we make a few additional adjustments, and then largely we're just tightening up the mix. Like, how do you like Dea's vocals? How's the beat sitting? Is there any general frequency issues, any drops we want to do, any little arrangement changes we want to make? So it's always nice to have the artist in the room kind of sitting over your shoulder. And at the end of the day, you're working for them. You're trying to deliver an amazing product for them. But it's a creative thing. So having their voice as part of the process is always helpful. I always encourage artists to come and sit down with me towards the later stages of the mix so we can go through it together. It's just way more productive. So anyways, so we start going through the mix. We get it all right. It's getting close. And then out of nowhere, I get a knock on the door. And I'm thinking, oh, I'm getting a noise complaint. Security's coming to shut this down. So I go to the door and I open the door. And it's a young guy. And I don't recognize him. I don't know who it is. I'm like, hey, how's it going? And he's like, hey, you're mixing my song. Or actually, no, he opened. He's like, hey, are you the other Chainsmoker? I guess he thought I was like Alex, or maybe he hadn't met the guys before. He's like, are you the other Chainsmoker? I was like, what? I just kind of looked confused. Keep in mind, Drew is in my apartment, but the way that the entranceway to the door is, like, he was sitting on the couch. You couldn't actually see him, but he could hear the conversation. I'm like, no, I'm not a Chainsmoker. I don't know what you mean. And he's like, well, you're mixing my song. I wrote this song with Dea, or produced, produced Dea's vocal or something like that. The guy's name was Gino. And I was like, oh, that's what a small world. I mean, so how did you know that I was mixing the song? How'd you knock on the door? He's like, I literally live right below you, like same apartment number, one floor down. So I heard the bass through the walls, and immediately I knew it was the song that we did. I was like, oh, no way, that's crazy. And then Drew came out and said hi and whatever. And it was just like a short little interaction, and then Gino left. I simply told him I was mixing the record, and he left. So that right there, that just shows you how small a world LA is. So anyways, then we get the mix done. Sounds great. Deliver it, and of course it went and did what it did. Top 5 record, and won my first trophy. I had worked on other Grammy-winning projects, but the first trophy where I was sort of named. And yeah, I mean, amazing song, huge part of my career. But I say this story just to say, one, LA and the other music hubs are really, it's a small world. You're going to run into all sorts of people who work in music just living your life in LA. And so I guess the moral of the story is, if you want to have a career in music, a true career in music, and I tell this to everybody who asks, you really have to move to the city where the majority of your peers are working. If you want to work in country music or rock, that means going to Nashville, right? If you want to work in Latin music, it likely means you're going to want to go to Miami. And in the case of pop music, you probably want to be in Los Angeles. Now, there are other hubs like Atlanta, and of course New York has always been a hub, although it's a bit diminished. I've talked about that. But for pop music, LA is really the hub. And so if your goal is to work around these specific types of artists and you want to get access to them, remember their management, their agents, their, everybody, their friends, their assistants, you name it. Anybody who works with those artists likely live in the city where those artists are. In my case, LA. And there's so many artists who live in LA. It's just become this place where you will, on any given day, taking an Uber, going to the club, going to a restaurant, hopefully when COVID eases up, we'll all be able to do that again. But regardless, wherever you go, even the barber shop, your barber might cut so-and-so's hair and blah, blah, blah. You might run into that artist at the shop, like little things like that. It's really a small town. And so if you are pursuing a career in music, I think it's a really important step to move to the city where all your peers are working. You're going to run into people, you're going to network, you're going to be able to create opportunities for yourself, just from being in a place where others, your peers who are doing it at a high level, where they all live. So that was just a small story that just shows how small of a town LA is. I'm mixing the song. The vocal producer lives right below me. I have no idea. I've never met him. I just moved into this apartment. And and so then you build a relationship from that. So anyways, that's the moral of the story this week. I'm DJ Swivel, and I will catch you guys in a few weeks for another story time. Peace.